up for a week. And in that time, I've been getting around about 200 signatures per day. I'm at around about 1,100 at the moment. And I really need to get those figures up because every signature is going to be a voice for our children. And without the voices, government's not going to really, I think, take it as serious to just how essential the service is.
All right. Thank you, Bronwyn, for talking to us. Bronwyn Ngātai on the panel.
Okay.
We'll see what happens with that. 4 minutes to 5 in the US. An outcry over a new first-person shooter video game that lets you play as a school shooter or a member of a SWAT team sent in to tackle one. The outrage, as you can imagine, is considerable from anti-violence groups and parents of children killed in American schools. What do you do? I mean, if Valve Productions, that's the company releasing this, wants to put it out there, do you stop it?
It's actually being made by a third party and released on, it uses their technology, Valve's technology. Anyone can build a game based on this and put it out through the Steam thing. I looked at it today. It looks terrible. It looks like, I mean, notwithstanding the subject matter, as far as a game goes, the game looks like it's 10 years old. I don't think it's going to become a big seller. It looks like it was just sort of knocked together, I think, I don't know why, but to get some outrage or something like that, to get some attention for the company in question. It's not a, you look at the current sway, the video games that are ultra realistic, look beautiful, wonderful to play, strong female characters, things like this, that we're starting to see. This is not one of these games. It's just, I think it's a pile of,
Even if it's just a marketing ploy in the way you describe, that in itself is invidious, isn't it?
Yeah. But there are some strange, weird people out there, Jim.
Yeah, there are, but technology can be good and bad, can't it? I mean, there is another game that I've been reading about recently. There's a rubbish collecting robot that goes into rivers, and you can operate this from anywhere at all. And they've gamified a problem, and kids can spend time doing this, and they get money for collecting a certain amount of rubbish.
Hang on, this is money for collecting imaginary rubbish from an imaginary river.
No, it's real rubbish.
Oh, so it's controlling a real robot?
Yes,
right.
in rivers.
Seriously?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
In the same way that you have these horrible games.
I don't know that it's going to have all the sort of the guys sitting on the couch on a Friday night drinking beer.
Unless they have a competition, I don't know.
I love it. I love the idea.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I'm just still trying to process that. So the robot is a real robot by a real river.
Yes, it's physically in a river collecting rubbish.
Yeah.
And you earn money by gathering a certain amount of rubbish. I'm not quite sure of the actual mechanism, but it's a way of dealing with pollution.
Presumably only one player at a time can play this.
Well, I guess so, but there's potential there, isn't there, for more?
Millions of robots and millions of rivers. Before we go, speeding drivers in the UK, more likely to be middle-aged, more likely to drive European cars, especially Audis. The slowest drivers are in Suzukis.
The numbers are low. I think it was 8% of drivers speed, but the Audi thing is absolutely consistent with all my friends who know. You look at who's running red lights. It's all these souped up sort of they go under the radar. These souped up Audis. They go very, very fast, and they're driven by businessmen who haven't quite grown up, and they've got a $100,000 sports car that can. Yeah, I see it all the time.
Of course, both of you would never speed, not even a little bit.
Not on my bike.
Who's worse, someone who gets on a motorway and goes 90 k's an hour instead of 80, with the Auckland motorway speeds lower now, and someone who does 70 in the outside lane instead?
They're both a danger in different ways.
That's right.
Yeah. Diplomatic answer. You should have been a politician yourself. Damien Christie, thank you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to see you. And Heather Roy, nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you too, Jim. Thank you.
We are back tomorrow. Thanks for your company, everybody. And Checkpoint is on the way.
Toti mara e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, the needless panic and its very large cost. The homes that weren't made unsafe by methamphetamine contamination. What happens next? Also tonight, the cousin of a 12-year-old killed in a police pursuit yesterday speaks out, and someone hit during a police pursuit tells us police need to call more of them off. The Prime Minister and Biosecurity Minister visit a Waimate farm and announce MPI numbers will be boosted by 50 to help farmers. Plus, a Mid-Canterbury farmer tells all of the distress of sending his 2,000-strong herd of cows to the works. And after 4 years, the search for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 is officially over.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A major shake-up of the healthcare system could be on the cards, with the government looking at how services are being delivered around the country. The Health Minister, David Clark, has announced a review to study inequities in access to healthcare in different regions. He wants more service sharing and less bureaucracy in the health sector.
I think that will necessarily mean some change. The extent of that change will depend upon what the review finds in terms of striking the balance between local responsiveness and ensuring we have an efficient delivery system for our health services that's responsive to the needs of the New Zealand public.
David Clark says the review will complete an interim report by July next year. In a dramatic policy turnaround, homeowners are now being advised not to get their homes tested for methamphetamine. A report by the Prime Minister's Science Advisor found there's never been a documented case of someone getting sick from third-hand exposure to the illegal drug. Sir Peter Gluckman says New Zealand has been caught up in hysteria about meth, and an inexplicable leap in logic resulted in clean-up standards for meth labs jumped to become a measure for third-hand exposure. The Drug Foundation's Executive Director Ross Bell says the report condemns the country's whole approach to dealing with meth.
It's a very sober and thoughtful analysis, and I think it puts to bed a lot of the fear and hysteria that's been generated.
Ross Bell from the Drug Foundation. 240 state houses previously deemed contaminated by meth will be available for tenants immediately. The government has admitted the current biosecurity legislation may have hindered a faster response to the Mycoplasma bovis crisis. It announced yesterday a plan costing almost $1 billion to eradicate the disease from the country's dairy cattle, with no guarantee the plan will succeed. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and the Agriculture Minister, Damien O'Connor, told reporters in Waimate today that a comprehensive review of the Biosecurity Act is now planned. Ms Ardern says an overhaul will ensure the Act is fit for purpose.
And every time I have a conversation, I hear something else that makes me think, was the Biosecurity Act agile enough for us to be able to deal with this infection as quickly and effectively as we could? So we're learning as we go the ways that we can improve the legislation.
The government says the review will begin once the immediate crisis is in hand. The Police Association says the age of drivers is taken into account when pursuing fleeing drivers. 2 young people were killed yesterday near Palmerston North when the 15-year-old driver crashed into a power pole after failing to stop for police. The passenger killed was a 12-year-old girl, and the 15-year-old girl who survived is in a stable condition in Palmerston North Hospital. The Police Association Vice President Craig Ticklepenny says when chasing drivers who refuse to stop, police are constantly assessing the risks.
The officers in the car, they would have been doing their risk assessment. Supervisors of those staff out on the street, they'd be doing risk assessments. And over the top of that, the communications centre would have been doing their assessments.
Craig Ticklepenny says the age of the driver is part of that assessment. A task force will tackle a payroll mess which may have left hundreds of thousands of workers out of pocket. In recent years, many employers have underpaid their staff due to mistakes calculating holiday pay because of confusion with the Holidays Act. In 2016, officials estimated up to 760,000 workers could be affected, at a total cost as high as $2 billion. The Workplace Relations Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, wants the task force to come up with ways to simplify the law and promises any changes won't mean fewer entitlements for workers. The task force is due to report back in a year. The latest life expectancy world rankings show Fiji has the highest death rate from diabetes in the world. 188 out of 100,000 deaths in the country are attributed to the disease. The head of Diabetes Fiji, Viliamo Gio, says people are in denial, so when they eventually go to a doctor, they have more severe complications from their illness. Mr. Gio says there are 3 amputations a day in the major hospitals.
People are presenting late, they come very late. They're not coming early. So we want to get people to be educated that they have to seek medical attention first before they resort to other traditional method or herbal method.
Viliamo Gio says people need to heed public health messages about poor eating habits and sedentary lifestyles. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport. The former boss of Southern Hemisphere Rugby has been named as the new Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby League. Greg Peters will take up the role vacated by Alex Hayton, who resigned in March, just before the release of a damaging review into last year's failed World Cup campaign by the Kiwis. It's a change of direction for Peters, whose 20 years in sports administration has been primarily in rugby union, with roles at Sanzar, the Argentinian rugby union, and the Hurricanes. The Golden State Warriors have claimed their 4th consecutive berth in the NBA basketball finals with a 101-92 win over the Houston Rockets in Game 7 of the Western Conference to give them a 4-3 series win. Golden State, the reigning NBA champions, will defend their title against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The first final is on Friday. The men's doubles French Open defending champion Michael Venus says he's close to reaching last year's heights with new partner South African Raven Klaasen. Venus and Klaasen paired up at the start of the year following the New Zealanders' split with American Ryan Harrison. The new pair have failed to reach a final this season, but Venus says after a solid week of training they're full of confidence for tonight's opening match at Roland Garros.
You know, we've had a solid couple months on the clay. You know, haven't had that big result, but put ourselves in good positions consistently each week. So if we keep doing that, hopefully, we'll come through on some of those big moments. Venus and Klaasen play an unseeded French combination. That's the news.
Nurses want more pay.
How much do you want to bank on someone's life? It's only $500 million. What a life's worth.
How to fix the gender pay gap.
Special training allowances to encourage women back into the workforce, offering flexible work which allow people to get back into the workforce more on their own terms.
What do you pay for an affordable home?
If this is as good as it gets, then what's the point of doing the program? That we're spending $1.9 billion on a program that's going to turn our houses that cost $650,000 and it just doesn't make sense.
It pays to listen. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a former Australian Assistant Treasurer, now head of the OECD Tax Policy Division, who backs a capital gains tax, which he says will bring this country into line with other developed economies. And after 10, Mark Warren, Hawke's Bay sheep farmer and four-wheel drive expert, who's taught hundreds how to drive in snow, ice and mud. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine, apart from 1 or 2 showers about the west coast. Auckland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo fine with morning frosts. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, occasional showers, some heavy today, mainly about the coast and north of Wairoa. Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, mainly fine in northern Taranaki, Manawatu and Horowhenua. Cloudy periods elsewhere with isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. Wellington and Wairarapa, occasional showers becoming confined to the coast tomorrow. Nelson, Bulla, Westland, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine with morning frosts. However, a few showers about Christchurch and Banks Peninsula today. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine with morning and evening fog or frost, but cloudy at times about coastal areas. The Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up, police pursuits and the deaths in them. But we begin tonight with the health risk that wasn't and its extraordinary and unnecessary cost. The government says over $100 million has been wasted, homes lost through evictions and lives needlessly ruined as a result of the moral panic behind flawed methamphetamine testing rules. A new report from the government's top science advisor has found that there's never been a case of someone getting sick from third-hand exposure to methamphetamine anywhere in the world. The new advice to the public is do not get your house tested for meth unless the police specifically advise you it was a meth lab. But as political journalist Benedict Collins reports, the official acknowledgement that New Zealand has been in the grip of a moral panic over meth is far too late for many.
It's been dubbed the meth myth. A study by the Prime Minister's chief science advisor, Sir Peter Gluckman, has found that while consuming meth is dangerous, there's never been a documented case of someone getting sick from third-hand exposure to it. Sir Peter says there's been an inexplicable leap in logic in New Zealand, which saw clean-up standards for meth labs used overseas jump to become a measure for third-hand exposure.
There's absolutely no evidence in the medical literature anywhere in the world of anybody being harmed by passive exposure to methamphetamine at any level. We can't find one case in the medical literature. We can't find one case by talking to experts where there's evidence of that harm. It makes no sense.
Dr. Anne Bardsley did most of the work on the report and said people should only have a meth test done if they're advised their house was a lab.
Well, if they have no reason to think that it was, we would recommend them not testing. That has been driven by the industry.
Sir Peter agrees.
I mean, I can't see the point of testing, full stop, unless the police or the forensics suspect that there's been a place of synthesis.
And Sir Peter says the odds of your home being a meth lab are very remote indeed. Firstly, because the drug is mostly imported, and secondly, because the way meth is normally manufactured now seldom releases solvents. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says the moral panic around meth has led to needless cleanups and State House evictions.
$100 million in the case of Housing New Zealand. Goodness knows how much in the private sector. So money's been wasted. Hundreds and hundreds of homes have been left vacant in the middle of a housing crisis, and many hundreds of tenants, individuals and families, a significant number of whom will have been evicted on the basis of faulty information.
Housing New Zealand was repeatedly warned that it was misusing guidelines intended for the clean-up of meth labs, but it continued evicting hundreds of tenants for meth contamination and would then pursue them through the Tenancy Tribunal, publicly celebrating when enormous clean-up costs were awarded against them. Housing New Zealand's Chief Executive, Andrew Mackenzie, wouldn't answer questions today. But the Drug Foundation's Executive Director, Ross Bell, says the new report comes years too late.
The real harm has been the social harm, where people have been essentially wrongly evicted from social housing, including Housing New Zealand, who have then been taken to the Tenancy Tribunal and have had all those costs awarded against them, and then being stood down from accessing social housing for 12 months. How do you give compensation to those very vulnerable families who have been impacted by this?
The Tenancy Tribunal says it has always relied on the most relevant and current guidelines for meth contamination. Phil Twyford has a simple message for those people.
It's not fair.
Ross Bell hopes today's report is the writing on the wall for some meth testing companies who he says have been fueling hysteria.
This is a huge mess that they've created. I would like to see some of the worst culprits of this industry to disappear.
The founder of the nationwide meth testing company, Meth Solutions, Miles Stratford, says the report won't be the end of his industry.
Obviously, the report itself fits very neatly with the stated position of Phil Twyford, and the Housing Ministry has got obviously some economic interests at stake. And as far as the advice not to test is concerned, I mean, testing is partly about health risk, but it's also about significant financial risk as far as the investment property owner is concerned. And where you get methamphetamine, you get behaviours that can result in significant damage to property.
Housing New Zealand will immediately adopt Sir Peter's new recommended testing guidelines that are far higher, and 240 state houses previously deemed to be contaminated will immediately be made available for tenants. And the government has ordered an investigation into Standards New Zealand, which developed new meth testing guidelines last year because they are at such odds with Sir Peter's report. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
And we'll have more on this later in the programme. We turn now to police pursuits, which are once again under the spotlight following the deaths of a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old in Palmerston North yesterday. A short time ago, we received a statement from the family of the 12-year-old, Meadow James. Her cousin, Javanaya, spoke on behalf of her family, a 15-year-old talking about a 12-year-old. Here's what Javanaya wanted to say.
She died at the scene of the car crash. She was only 12 years old. She had a big light towards her. Now she's gone. And everything's just upside down for my family and myself. And I just want everyone to understand that doing this stuff hurts us and our family, and it means a lot for the support people are putting into us and my family, my cousin, her sister, and everything. I just want Meadow to know that I love her with every bit of my heart.
Meadow's cousin, Javanaya. A 15-year-old and a 12-year-old yesterday. 2 Saturdays ago it was another 15-year-old. That's 3 children too young to even be driving in the space of just over a week. And 5 deaths in police pursuits this month. This area is under review, of course, and the National Manager for Road Policing was on Morning Report this morning saying risk assessments are continually conducted and police abandon just over half of all chases. Now, Carolyn Higgs thinks they should abandon more. A very young person driving a stolen car, do lives really need to be put at risk over that? This is a balancing act, of course, but Carolyn Higgs used to trust the police to get that balancing act right. Until in October of last year, she was hit by a car being pursued by police. It had been stolen by young teenagers in Wainui or Mata, sighted by police on traffic cameras in Lower Hutt, followed on the Kapiti Expressway and then pursued at speed further north. By the time it hit the car, Carolyn Higgs and her husband and brother were in live-in.
So we were just turning the corner to go onto the main drag, and I says to my husband, I can hear a freight train coming. And the next thing, all I know is that we were slammed into. You know, we had the green light. We were slammed into. I yelled at him and said, what the F's happening? And he goes, I don't know. And we ended 120 metres down the road. And when we finally stopped, we ended up on the other side of the road facing the direction we had come, and all these idiot cop cars just went straight past us.
So the pursuit continued past you. Who came to your aid, Carolyn?
The only people that actually turned up was the public. At that stage, they were the ones that were ringing 111, ambulance, fire. This cop that finally turned up breath tested my husband. He turned around and said to my husband that you'll be scratching whether you get any money out of or get anything for it. They have not been in contact with us. About a week after it happened, we had to go down to the community law centre here in Taurua. And it was the law office that actually contacted the police. They didn't know anything about it.
So by that stage you hadn't heard from the police, and when you contacted the police they didn't know your car had been hit in the pursuit. Can I just confirm this? Did any of the police cars involved in the pursuit stop?
No, not one of them.
And how many were there, do you estimate?
Look, all I saw was, I don't know, because all I saw was all these stupid flashing red and blue lights go past us. Not one of those cop cars stopped.
And so you had been hit by the person they were pursuing?
Yep. They didn't offer us victim support. They didn't offer, there was no crash investigation unit or anything, nothing like that turned up. We were just left standing on the side of the street. Yeah.
So when she hit you, she didn't stop, she just kept going?
Nope, she didn't stop.
And the police didn't stop. You're absolutely certain about that?
Oh, hell yes. I should know. I was in the car.
And so what do you think of that pursuit? What is your sense? Was that appropriate?
I am so angry with them. I hate the cops. I used to respect those idiots, and now I don't. I think they are a load of shit. Because it has been, since October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Coming up nearly 8 months, right? And they haven't even contacted us. They haven't even apologised. They haven't investigated what had happened. It was all kicked off to youth court. The cops didn't even apologise. We haven't even heard from them.
The police force?
No. Yeah, we haven't even heard from them. Everybody's telling us to write a letter to that.
The Independent Police Complaints Authority.
Yeah, and Kevin started it. That's my husband. But he looks at it and thinks, well, it's a waste of time. What are we going to get out of it? We're not going to get nothing.
That's Carolyn Higgs, who was involved in an accident. She was hit by a car being pursued by police in Levin last October. We've gone to police about that a short time ago and we are waiting to hear back from them. It's 19 and a half minutes past 5. Let's move on to another of the very big stories this week. This is Mycoplasma bovis. A mid-Canterbury farmer will lose 55 years of breeding when his entire herd of 2,000 cattle go to slaughter after just one tested positive for M. bovis. Yesterday's announcement by the government to eradicate the disease over the next 10 years means Ashburton farmer Frank Peters will be forced to start all over again. Now, this comes as the Prime Minister and Agriculture Minister visited the Waimate farm today, offering ongoing support for farmers dealing with the disease and pledging to fast-track compensation payments. Zach Fleming and cameraman Nick Monroe were there.
On the ground, on a farm in Waimate this afternoon, the Prime Minister and Agricultural Minister selling their $886 million plan to eradicate Mycoplasma bovis.
Today, we're here again together, members of the industry, visiting those farmers who have been directly affected by M. bovis to talk through the experiences that they've had, where we can improve, how we can make sure that we give that certainty to those who are directly affected. And that's a big focus for MPI going forward.
Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor not ruling out a ban on waste milk and promising 50 more MPI field staff.
We've got more people in the compensation team, really essential. We need more people on the ground that are working directly with the infected properties. We'll have more people in terms of administrative roles to ensure that the process works smoothly. We're then going to be coordinating industry people. So there's a need for an increasing resource across the board. MPI will be one part of that, but industry organisations, Rural Support Trust, Rural Women, they'll be a big part of it as well.
Farmer Leo Benzaguez welcomed the Prime Minister and shared his now positive outlook after his cows were found to be infected with M. bovis in August last year.
All the cows got killed and we started the cleanup. So we actually start to see the light after the channel. We got all our cows back. We got the money from MPI, so we pretty happy.
But 2 hours north of Waimate, mid-Canterbury dairy farmer Frank Peters isn't feeling so happy. He tells me he barely slept last night. Yesterday's announcement's already taking its toll.
Every day the thing is another decision to make, and it's another part that destroys us. Sorry.
That's all right.
Oh, just too much this morning, too much.
As the reality sets in, Frank is emotional.
I know now everything has to go. We're still waiting on tests. We await decisions. We await people to make their minds up of what they wanted to do. And we carry on making decisions every time we want to do something and see how we go. And it just turns around and goes backwards again. So.
When you say everything has to go, how many cows are we talking here?
Well, I've already got rid of 720 plus 280 calves. I've got another 500 cows that are winter milkers, which we're still milking, and we're supposedly things can carry on milking them, but they'll have to go. And then we have a runoff where our rising 2s and rising 1s are, so there's another bit over 200 each, so there's another about 450 odd. So yeah, probably we've got rid of 1,000 and there's close to 1,000 to go yet. So.
And have any of these cows showed any symptoms?
Not one. Nothing. Not one. We've still got we've still got the cow that they tested as having bovis. The thing's still in the winter milkers, so she's still there. So they haven't asked her to be killed or anything, so she's still there.
Over the past few months, Frank's farm has undergone extensive testing, including 2 rounds of blood tests and 1 milk test of his almost 2,000 strong herd. Just 1 tested positive for bovis, and because of that, the entire herd must be culled. Frank says the infected cow came from a farm in mid-Canterbury in April 2014, around the same time he purchased 87 cows from Alphonse Zeestraten in Winton. Do you have any theory as to whether she got Mycoplasma bovis from the other Canterbury farm you bought her from, or whether she contracted that from a Zeestraten cow that you bought alongside her?
Your guess is as good as mine. At the moment, the thing is, if you actually turn around and say the pathways from Southern Dairies, the Zeestraten farm, you would say so, but I'm not sure. The thing is they say Zeestraten's a trace thing from the end of 15. That doesn't make sense for us. So Did it come from this other herd in mid-Canterbury? Well, I don't know. The thing is the place hasn't been tested where they come from, so where she came from. And also, it just doesn't fit in with all the pathways they're talking. So,
So you don't know, MPA doesn't know, but that farm that she came from still hasn't been tested to this day?
That's right, it hasn't been tested, no. I've made it quite clear, I think, the thing is it is from Sea Stratton, because that's the only place I feel the information I've been given is that. We had a trace vet at our place, and he said the thing is he thought that was the place it came from. We've also had MPI asking the thing is why we think it comes from there. Well, where else can it come from? And they haven't come and said to me the thing is it's anywhere else.
Do you think that it can be eradicated, given no one really knows 100% where or when it came from?
Yes, exactly. Well, at this moment in time, there's still 6 or 7 pathways that it could have come in. Have they blocked the hole?
The government's phased eradication at a cost of $886 million will see the cull of over 150,000 cattle, including the rest of Frank's herd, who will go to the works at the end of winter milking. You're facing a cumulative cull of around about 2,000 cows. Are you confident that you'll get the accurate compensation for what those cows are worth?
I hope so. But what is like for like? The thing is, I've got 55 years of breeding. The thing is that I can't go and buy a herd like that tomorrow. Replacing all those animals, the thing is that you can't go and, but the thing is, find 2,000 cows or 2,000 animals out on the next door neighbour's farm. It's a cumulative place of gathering them all over the place. So the thing is to be able to bring them in, and that scares me again because I could quite easily bring Bovis back.
Frank says rural support has been working with farmers to help them through what is a challenging time.
And the thing is I'm probably a little bit better than I was probably a fortnight ago. The thing is, yesterday, I suppose if you look at the announcement, the thing is we were stuffed anyway. So the thing is we were over. So.
Are you going to keep farming, Frank?
Yep. No, it's still a passion. It's still there. It doesn't go away. That never goes away.
Frank has a message for the Prime Minister and her entourage.
Come and talk to some of these people, on a personal basis, rather than other things turning around and just sort of in a media scenario. So it needs to be talked to, the things. And realistically, Mid-Canterbury is the hub of where it is at the moment. It seems to be the biggest part of where most of the stock are that are actually under notice or are infected at the moment. So, come and see us anytime.
The Prime Minister says the disease is on at least 37 farms, but the government expects 192 properties will be impacted in the final cull.
We are talking about less than 1% of farms being affected, so being in that category of having to bring in or buy new stock relative to the 99% who won't. The key here is acknowledging for those farmers affected it is huge, but actually there's a large proportion that won't be, and we want to protect that national herd.
In Waimate for Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
28 minutes past 5. A monumental payroll mess which has left thousands of workers out of pocket is in the government's crosshairs. Businesses and unions have long called for an overhaul of the Holiday Act, saying its complexity has resulted in many employers underpaying their staff. Now, all the players are putting their heads together to try to find a solution. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
For years, calculating holiday pay, particularly for part-timers or casual workers, has been a headache. And the list of underpayers keeps growing. The police, the Department of Corrections, district health boards, the Auckland Council, even the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, the very agency which oversees the rules, is guilty. And businesses say it's no surprise, given the unwieldy legislation.
They are impeded by this law that actually means they have to check 3 calculations for every employee. And actually, the only way to really check is to do a manual calculation. That's how complicated this is.
John Milford from Business New Zealand approached the government late last year with a plea for change, and alongside him, an unlikely partner, Richard Wagstaff from the Council of Trade Unions.
One of the issues is that people haven't raised the gaps that are there because they don't understand it themselves. A lot of working people don't understand what their true entitlement is, let alone their employers, so it's very difficult for them to challenge it.
The government has come to the table. It's setting up a task force with people from both sides to come up with a solution. Law Professor Gordon Anderson from Victoria University will chair the group.
It's our ambition to get the Act in a shape that will be fit for the rest of the 21st century and move it on from its origins in the pre-computer days of the 1950s.
It's not the first time an overhaul's been attempted. The previous national government considered it, but said it couldn't see a way to simplify the law without workers being worse off. The Workplace Relations Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, is confident it can be done.
There's no doubt that this is a big challenge. We're all aware of the enormity of the task that we're taking on, but we're up for the task.
More than that, the Minister is promising no worker will be worse off as a result of any changes.
I'm very confident that we can come up with a solution where people's entitlements are not reduced. That's a requirement as far as I'm concerned.
Philippa Muir is over the moon. She's an employment lawyer at Simpson Grierson and says the law is well overdue for an update.
It won't be straightforward, but what would be ideal is to move to one formula for all types of leave.
The task force is to report back with its recommendations in roughly a year's time.
I don't want to be back in another 5 years trying to fix this up again. We've got to get this right and we should take the time to do that.
Atu i te whare parimata mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, a major shake-up for District Health Boards, DHBs. Another serious assault on a nurse at Christchurch's Hill Morton Hospital. We're there, and for the first time in South Africa, the rugby history of that nation, 127 years is playing. As a South African team, they have a black skipper leading the national test tide for the first time in 127 years. All that known as next with business news, but before all, Katrina with the headlines.
Hundreds of state houses previously thought to be contaminated with methamphetamine will immediately be available for tenants. The government says dubious meth contamination rules have led to hundreds of millions of dollars being wasted in cleanups and unnecessary evictions. The Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, Sir Peter Gluckman, says the country has been gripped by hysteria over meth contamination. The government has admitted the current biosecurity legislation may have hindered a faster response to the Mycoplasma bovis crisis. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and the Agriculture Minister, Damien O'Connor, have told reporters in Waimate today that a comprehensive review of the Biosecurity Act is now planned. The healthcare system could be in for a shake-up with the government examining how services are being delivered around the country. The Health Minister, David Clark, today announced a review into inequities in accessing healthcare, as he says complexities in the current system can get in the way. He says he wants to see more service sharing and less bureaucracy. Nurses want security guards stationed at Christchurch Hill Morton Hospital's acute inpatient unit following another serious assault. Staff at the mental health hospital have told RNZ a nurse was strangled and dragged across the floor by a psychotic patient early on Sunday morning. The Police Association says the age of drivers is taken into account when pursuing fleeing drivers. 2 young people were killed yesterday near Palmerston North when the 15-year-old driver crashed into a power pole after failing to stop for police. The Police Association Vice President Craig Ticklepenny says police are constantly assessing the risks when giving chase. Fiji has the highest death rate from diabetes in the world, with figures showing that 3 limbs are amputated every day in major hospitals. Doctors say sufferers are in denial, so when they eventually go to a doctor, they have more severe complications from their illness. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Sitting on the other side of me, Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello there.
Tower Insurance warns premiums will rise because of claims caused by unprecedented stormy weather.
That's right, yes. So they made a first half loss, and they said that, so their first half loss was 11.6 million. That's for the 6 months ended in March. And
what's stormy weather costing?
Well, that's 24 million so far this financial year, and that's more than all of the last financial year all put together. So big, expensive claims coming through, storm damage, all sorts. The AA insurance sent out a statement today talking about the amount of damage caused by falling trees in Auckland in the April storm. They said they received more claims in a day than they had in a whole month. Yeah, 6 times as many claims from that Auckland storm as they got from Cyclone Gita.
Wow. So that's in numerical terms, right? That's in terms of all
not just value. Not necessarily value. But it does give an indication of just how big the problem is.
And this goes back to what Tim Grafton of the Insurance Council has been saying for what, a year or two now, that flood-prone areas.
All sorts, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's not just flood. It's all sorts of weather-related events. So it could be flood. It could be strong wind. Well, yeah, we've been there, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Might even be some cold weather for some people, perhaps.
Yeah. Thanks, Nona. So more of that, stormy weather, and insurance companies want to protect themselves against it.
So the premiums are likely to go up as a result, and so people should be prepared for that. One of the things the AA insurance said is that people could, mitigate some of the problem by proper maintenance of their trees. A lot of trees fell over, but some of them were, not well maintained, and that's not something you typically do, but maybe it's something you should.
Right, the country's biggest listed transport company, Mainfreight, will be giving some of its staff a bigger bonus after reporting a higher annual profit.
Yes.
These are the kind of things we like to discuss,
Yes, no, that's right.
So Mainfreight sharing...
Now, they're a really big company. Mainfreight, it's been around in business for a long time. They've got operations on every continent practically. Big business in Australia and New Zealand, and so they're going to give a bonus to their staff. Now, they don't give it to everybody. They give it to only the profitable business units. So last year, 154 units got the bonus out of more than 200 units. Some of them were not very profitable. So if you belong to a profitable unit, you get the bonus. And that's what distributed $2 million. It's not bad.
And that's everyone in the profitable unit.
Everyone in the profitable...
including people who may be on the minimum wage or just above it or whatever.
Well, now that's interesting because they're also going to be, they have been providing quite large, bigger than expected increases to people on lower wages. Now, they don't have anyone on anything below the living wage. They don't pay anyone a minimum wage.
Isn't that nice to put that on the record? This is Mainfreight we're talking about.
Don Braid, who's the managing director, gave me a call this afternoon because I was asking questions about it and I wasn't really getting a clear answer. And he explained it like this. They don't want anyone in their business to earn less than $60,000 a year. So anyone who wasn't quite up to $60,000 was going to get a very large wage increase. Now, everybody gets a wage increase that's tied to inflation, depending on where they are. So in New Zealand and Australia, they were giving a 3% wage increase this year. But if you were under that 60, there was one person who got $5,200 extra in their paycheck for
which in percentage
the year.
terms must have to get them to 60 grand or her to 60 grand.
That's a large increase.
So that's about 9%.
And that's where they want their company to be. They don't want their workers working for less than 60K. How's that sound?
Yeah, it's good. Go Mainfreight.
Yeah.
What happened on the markets today?
Okay, well, actually, Mainfreight's share price was up. It rose... just behind. I've got the number here.
We'll think of that as a pregnant pause as we wait.
No, not at all. Mainfreight's share price rose more than 1%. That's 30 cents to 26.05. Towers fell nearly 2%. That was down 1.5 cents to 78. And overall, the index closed down 9 points to 8,636. And our dollar is buying 69.3 US. 92 Australian and 52.1 pence. There you go.
Nona Peltier with Business News. Thank you very much indeed, Nona. District Health Boards, gosh, we've talked about them a lot on Checkpoint over the past couple of years. They could be in for a major shake-up as the government looks to cut back on bureaucracy and improve access to healthcare services. The Health Minister, David Clark, has today announced a broad review into healthcare inequities. As he says, complexities in the current system are getting in the way. Complexities. Nita Blake-Person has the details.
New Zealand's 20 district health boards vary hugely in size. Waitemata in Auckland, for example, looks after more than 500,000 people, while the West Coast DHB has a population of just 32,600. But no matter what its size, every DHB has 11 board members, as well as a leadership team, which come with considerable costs. The Health Minister, David Clark, says with the sector under increasing pressure, things need to change.
Do I think that we could do with a little less bureaucracy and the ability to share services and share gains and knowledge and information across the sector? Yes, I do. I think most people working in the system can see where we could make some gains by sharing services and working together in a more collaborative way.
David Clark says the review will focus on primary and community-based care to help take pressure off hospitals and specialist services. Nick Baker, who works as a community paediatrician in Nelson and Marlborough, says the review is a great opportunity to figure out how things can be done better.
Often we tend to have those who need most sometimes get least, and we need to look at our ethnic disparities and social disparities in the area of child health. A lot of conditions vary almost in a predictable way with the conditions in which children are being raised. Diseases of deprivation.
Nick Baker says it's important care is focused on patients and not on DHB boundaries.
Not every DHB can offer every service, and so it is vital that DHBs work together. Now, a lot of progress has been made with groups of DHBs working together in alliances, but there's still further work that can be developed in that direction to ensure that we do get delivery of complex care to wherever you live in New Zealand.
Amy Downs is the Vice President of the Colorado Health Institute and last year wrote a report into New Zealand's primary healthcare services. She says there are far too many DHBs and primary health organisations across the country, and cutting them down to between 4 and 6 would simplify the system.
You can have people geographically very close with very different access to care. And if you had fewer DHBs, you'd have the CEs of those DHBs thinking systemically over large geographic regions.
Ms Downs says streamlining DHBs would not only cut back on administration costs, it would also create a far more efficient system.
You've got all those chief executives. You really stretch the talent pool in a country the size of New Zealand, but having many fewer, I think, could be much more effective, cost-effective, but also just effective in terms of how the system operates and provides care to people in New Zealand.
The review is being chaired by Heather Simpson, former Prime Minister Helen Clark's long-serving Chief of Staff, but other members have yet to be appointed. An interim report will be completed by next July, with the final version not due until January 2020. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blakeperson aho.
90 minutes to 6. Another serious assault on a nurse at Christchurch's Hillmorton Hospital is being blamed on inadequate staffing and the lack of an intensive care unit. Several nurses at the hospital's acute inpatients unit have told RNZ a nurse was strangled and dragged across the floor by a psychotic patient over the weekend. This comes just weeks after RNZ revealed that over the past 12 months, staff at Hillmorton's adult acute inpatients unit were assaulted up to 30 times a month. Logan Church reports.
Alarm bells rang through Hillmorton's acute inpatient unit on Sunday as a nurse was strangled and dragged across the floor by a patient. A nurse, who didn't want to be recorded for fear of being identified, says it is getting too much.
There were several assaults on nursing staff in acutes over the weekend. One in particular was very nasty. A female nurse was strangled, then dragged along the ground by a psychotic male patient. The situation was exacerbated by inadequate staffing. It's not good. Morale is at rock bottom.
The nurse says part of the problem is the building itself. They say an intensive care unit would be a huge help, as, if properly staffed, it would allow nurses to more easily manage the most volatile patients. The acute unit used to have an ICU, but in 2013 management scrapped it, instead creating 3-bedded high care areas in each of the 4 wards.
These high care areas are isolated and dangerous for patients and staff alike. Often inexperienced nurses are placed there to care for psychotic, aggressive and dangerous patients. Many of these young nurses are anxious and at times downright scared.
So, what makes these high care areas so dangerous? We asked the Canterbury District Health Board for a tour of the facility to see firsthand what the problems are. They refused. But here's what another nurse told us about the setup.
In our high care areas, the offices only have one entry point into the high care area. And there have been times when nurses have been locked in the high care area in the high care area office with no way of escaping. So they've been trapped because there's only one entrance.
As an immediate fix, the nurses' organisation's John Miller is calling for security to be placed on the wards immediately.
We've asked the DHB again to look at, as an interim measure, to look at having security on the wards. We have raised this before, and the DHB have given good reasons why they aren't keen, but and in the long term are looking at potentially another type of employee, another type of support worker in that environment. But we were hoping, and I'd want them to look again at a short-term interim measure around getting some security on those wards.
How soon would you like that to happen?
Tomorrow. Actually, today.
John Miller says a steering group, made up of nurses and management, is being set up to look at addressing issues at the Hill Mawson Acute Unit. It had its first meeting last week, and Mr Miller is hopeful it will lead to change. We requested an interview with the Canterbury DHB about last weekend's incidents. It said it would not be able to comment before deadline. The question on these nurses' minds is now whether safety will be beefed up at Hill Mawson and how long they'll have to wait to see action. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, call Logan Church Tēnei.
It is coming up to 5:45, almost exactly 5:45 in 5 seconds. Lots of feedback coming on police pursuits. This is a subject that really polarises you. People say, yes, police pursuits should be called off earlier. Others say it's not about the police, it's about the people who steal cars or commit crimes and drive off at speed and won't stop no matter what. And we're getting very strong responses on both sides of the coin. This is a hell of a balancing act for police. Very difficult to get it right. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk to people who have been involved in driving away from the police at great speed, or who are the family members of those who have done so. And it is a very revealing insight into why they do it and what their family members think of it. And you might be surprised by what they say. That will be on Checkpoint tomorrow night. In the meantime, do keep your feedback coming, 2101. Thank you. It's great to hear from you. Very strong opinions on both sides of the coin. The man they called the King of Waitangi has been farewelled this afternoon at the tiny Northland settlement of Te Te Maunganui. Kingi Taurua died in Auckland last Thursday, and hundreds of people from all over the motu have attended his tangihanga during the past 4 days. Our Northland reporter, Lois Williams, has been among them.
It was a good day for a send-off for a good man, and a relaxed one. The sun shone, the sea sparkled, and children ran and shouted on the green lawns of Whitiora Marae. Manuhiri who couldn't fit into the packed whare were offered fruit and cups of tea by shy teenagers and kindly aunties. And inside the house, the final farewells for Kingi Taurua, who lay in his coffin, draped in the korowai that's now seen of 56 Vietnam vets. Flanked by elderly Vietnam veterans, Kingi Taurua's waka was escorted from the whare for one last stop at the old Ngāti Rehia Marae, just down the road from the Urupā. The man whom many knew only as the volatile kaumātua of Waitangi was in his time a soldier, a corrections officer, an advisor to government ministers and an award-winning Māori broadcaster. The former Labour politician Dover Samuel says Kingi was a soldier to the last. In his last weeks he refused pain relief for his terminal cancer so he could stay alert for a steady flow of visitors to his hospital bed.
And he said to me, Dove, it's the same old story. Tatana koe te mate, that means that when you're getting to the stage where you're going to leave this land, everybody that didn't like you when you were alive and fit and well, coming to say farewell and how bloody good a bugger you were. and I had to laugh. And I said, yes. I said, I saw Titify going out the door. And he said, well, you're right, and that's what I'm saying. She gave me a kiss. And I said, well, how did you feel? He said, I think it was a kiss goodbye.
Kingi Taurua was a staunch campaigner for hapu rangatiratanga, or sovereignty. He was there at almost every Waitangi Tribunal hearing over recent years for the Ngāpuhi Treaty claims. The Treaty Negotiations Minister, Andrew Little, paid his respects on the last night of the tangi, and he told mourners Kingi's dedication to the cause was impressive. The Taitokiro MP Kelvin Davis, who was there today, tells the story of a recent hui over the troubled settlement.
Kingi was at the back. He had just come out of chemotherapy, and Andrew said, Kingi, you shouldn't be here, but Kingi wanted to be here. He wanted to see Ngāpuhi come to some sort of conclusion in terms of our settlements, but straight out of chemotherapy to this hui, and I guess it just is a sign of the man that he was. despite being very, very unwell, he got up here to Ngāpuhi Hui.
Over the past 4 nights, the stories and tributes have flowed thick and fast as Kingi Taurua's body was moved from Waitangi to Oromahoe and finally to his mother's marae at Te Ti Manganui. And there has been laughter to lighten the mood. David Samuels again.
At Waitangi, when I don't know who it was that got up, very passionate about saying that, now Kingi, you've become an angel. You know, I mean, Kingi's had many names. I mean, the king now is somebody sort of crowned him as an angel. For a while there, I thought, I looked at the coffin and I thought, this is going to scare the shit out of King. He's going to wake up.
But the former MP and veteran activist Hone Harawira says, above all, Kingi Taurua was an old-school rangatira.
And when I talk about old school, they're the type who make a decision as to what the people are going to do, and then they announce. They don't ask for a committee meeting. They don't ask for a hui. They hear what the kōrero is and then they make the announcement. So he'll be hugely missed in that regard. He had that ill. He had a connection to the old world and to the old people that we don't have anymore, not amongst those left at Waitangi. So
Waitangi, Mr Harawira says, will never be the same. Haere rā e te kingi o Taitoki Rau, e moi, haere atu rā. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
10 minutes to 6. Let's give you a sample of some of that feedback we're receiving on police pursuits. John, please just call me Mary. Hi Mary. I once worked with someone who knew a great deal about police pursuits. He said they were characterised by testosterone on both sides. Jan says, how the hell can police assess the age of drivers in a fleeing vehicle? This is plain absurd. Kids are dying on our roads because of these kinds of misjudgments. Edward says, John, leave the police alone. Talk about those criminals sitting inside the cars, please. In fact, we are going to talk about them. We're going to talk to them and their families tomorrow night about why they do it and what their families make of it, including the family of one boy who was killed in a police pursuit. And you may be surprised by the feedback we're getting from them. Yes, says David, there needs to be balance in the matter of people fleeing from the police. Please start the balance by changing the language you use to something like fleeing drivers at least 50% of the time. There's a lot of imbalance for you to make up, says David. There are also people who are saying, why don't we do what they do in Australia, which is use a system to tag the cars as they are going away so they can be pursued effectively by GPS and tracked by police that don't have to follow them but know where they are through tracking devices. We're also going to look at that and what they're doing in Australia as a kind of precedent. All of that on Checkpoint tomorrow night. 8.5 minutes to 6. For the first time in South African rugby's 127-year history, a history closely entwined with New Zealand rugby, of course, a black South African will captain a national test side. 26-year-old Sia Kolosi will lead the Springboks onto the field for their upcoming test series against England. The ABC's Africa correspondent, Sally Sara, reports.
For decades, it was one of the whitest teams in the world. But now, South Africa's Springboks will have their first black test captain, Sia Kolosi.
I got good opportunity and it's something I wish for every single kid in the township.
These days, the Springboks have a lot of diversity in their ranks. 26-year-old Kolosi grew up in a township in South Africa's Eastern Cape. He will captain South Africa for a 3-test series at home against England. He's already skippered local Super Rugby team, the Stormers. He's urging other young black South Africans to chase their sporting dreams.
If you want it, you can get it. Just be prepared for a moment opportunity comes. Keep on working for anything you want in life.
In 2006, another black player, Chile boy Relapele, captained the South Africans against a World 15. But Kolosi will be the first black player to captain the test side. Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus has plenty of faith in the flanker.
I coached him since he was 18 when, got him from the Eastern Cape to come to the Stormers. So I coached him right through the academy years, right through till he played for the Stormers. I know what he can do, I know his qualities, and I know he's grown as a man.
Look at the support. Brilliant by Sia Kolosi.
Kolosi has been outstanding this evening, and here he is. He's gone around the outside, he's freed up the gas man on the inside.
In days gone by, the all-white Springboks were seen as a symbol of the apartheid regime. The players were met with protests as they tried to play international sides.
Demonstrators faced a cordon of security staff as they prepared to greet the incoming Springbok rugby touring team from South Africa.
But all that changed. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections and Nelson Mandela became president. The anti-apartheid campaigner wore the Springbok jersey and urged the nation to get behind the team in the 1995 World Cup.
While the teams await the national anthems, a very emotional moment for both teams.
You made us all proud of being South Africans, citizens of the new non-racial democratic South Africa.
South African national anthems.
Now, 23 years later, a young black South African will be leading the team onto the field against England. Sia Khaleesi will be making rugby history.
Sally Sarah in Johannesburg, wasn't that a moment when Nelson Mandela came onto the field after the final of the Rugby World Cup in 1995? Quite extraordinary. More feedback on police pursuits. Hi John, your statement so true tonight. Children too young to be driving. Let us remember and be careful about romancing the dying children. What about culpability of the parents? Poor police being put in this unenviable position, says Rosie from Governor's Bay. And then this person said, for God's sake, John, we are talking about 21 deaths. If those who say their kids deserve it, well, it indicates the same societal collapse as we see in the USA. It is a hell of a balancing act. A very, very difficult one to get right, and the really polarised feedback we get every time we cover it is indicative of that. Thank you for your feedback. It's good to hear from you. Text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and we are, of course, on Twitter and Facebook. Gosh, it was chilly this morning. I don't know about where you were, but if it was cold in Auckland, it must have been very cold in other parts of the country. Some regions experiencing their coldest morning of the year. Temperatures were as low as 1.4 degrees in some parts of Auckland, while Ranfurly in Middlemarch in central Otago, where they really do know about cold, recorded the year's coldest temperatures so far, -6. Not everyone is complaining. One hardware store says it's seen an explosion of winter merchandise sales. Every cloud has a silver lining, ladies and gentlemen. Katie Scotcher reports.
It's just 3 days until winter officially starts, but it feels like it's already here. It was a crisp, cool start to the day for most of the country, including in Auckland, where temperatures have plummeted in recent days.
Sort of had the fire on for about the second or third time this season, so yeah, it was quite cold.
It was really cold. I had a 3 layer of clothes in the morning when I go to job. Yeah, it was pretty cold.
Very cold this morning, but it's a great day to get out and walk because there's blue sky, it's not raining, so yeah. Just one extra layer because I'm carrying my baby, so it's I don't need an extra jacket.
Ben Knoll, a meteorologist for NIWA, says it was an unusually chilly May morning for the top half of the North Island.
Dunedin was 4.7 and Christchurch was 3 degrees last night. So places in Auckland and Northland were a solid degree, 2, maybe even 3 degrees colder than some of those South Island centers. So again, if you stepped outside in the morning and you thought it was cold in Auckland, well, you were right.
Ben Knoll says Whangarei had its coldest May morning in 42 years at 0.8 degrees. Julie Patton runs a dairy farm in Northland and says the chilly weather isn't too out of the ordinary for this time of year.
It's been pretty warm up here up until the last week or so, I guess. And last night was definitely the coldest night of the year so far. But having said that, it was only 5 degrees, so I'm sure we're a lot better off than people further south.
Down in Southland, the town of Winton hit -3 degrees this morning, and people in the town seem to have little sympathy for those Aucklanders who felt the cold.
My heart breaks. Yep, heart breaks to them. It's so cold, isn't it? Come join -3, and it'll be day after day. Buy a decent jacket if they're complaining. We all do.
They'll survive.
Not at all. No, I don't have any sympathy at all.
Well, they'll have to come down and find out, won't they? We're quite happy.
Meanwhile, the colder weather means better business for homeware store Briscoe's. Its group managing director, Rod Duke, says the company sold thousands of electric blankets, flannelette sheets and duvet inners over the weekend.
From around about Thursday, Friday last week, when the weather pretty much nationwide turned, sales have just exploded on winter merchandise. It's right across flannelette, duvet inners, electric blankets, heating. It's just really responded well to the very cold weather.
And it may be worth picking up an electric blanket if you don't already own one. Niwa says the cold weather is set to hang around most of the country for the next few days. For Checkpoint, ko Katie Scott Tēnei.
It's about a minute and a half before 6. I love the rest of the country's derision for Aucklanders' inability to handle the cold, although it really was cold overnight, and there are lots and lots of homes in the city with no insulation. But point taken, rest of the country. I'm in Otago. It was a beautiful day, frosty and clear. I like the cold. A genuine winter, smiley face, says this person. A lot of feedback coming in about nurses, and this is pretty indicative. It's from Diana in Christchurch. Nice to hear from you, Diana. Pomaria, John. My partner is a full-time master's qualified senior nurse with over 25 years experience and works shifts between Monday and Friday. She's at the top rate. She currently earns 72k per annum. There is no chance she will earn 93k with the new rates. The averages the DHBs are using are deliberately misleading. If we want good healthcare in the future, the nurses need media and public support. Lots of feedback coming in supporting the nurses in their pay negotiations, and lots more coming in on pursuits. Police chases. Has anyone been killed by a car that should have been chased? Asked Maggie. And of course, Maggie, we don't know the answer to that question, but we are going to look at the issue in depth from both sides tomorrow night on Checkpoint. Let's have a break to save the pips.
RNZ News at 6. Pomaria, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Minister of Housing says the needless panic about methamphetamine has wasted millions of dollars and caused hundreds of needless evictions. Today, the country's top scientist announced there's no need to test for meth contamination, as there's not one recorded case of people getting sick from third-hand contact with traces of the drug. The scientist said the country has been gripped by meth contamination hysteria, and the Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says it's come at a cost.
Money's been wasted. Hundreds and hundreds of homes have been left vacant in the middle of a housing crisis, and many hundreds of tenants, individuals and families, a significant number of whom will have been evicted on the basis of faulty information.
Phil Twyford says 240 state houses previously deemed contaminated will be made available for tenants immediately. A South Canterbury dairy farmer says owners of herds infected with Mycoplasma bovis have little option but to have them destroyed. Leo Bensages says his Waimati herd was slaughtered after the cattle disease hit last year. He lost 950 cows and more than 200 young stock. Mr Bensages says it was an extremely difficult time, but it was either destroy the animals or watch them suffer and face significant loss in their value.
I do believe that there are going to be a lot of people unhappy, but if they say, no, we don't carry on, there are going to be a lot of people unhappy anyway, because we've been in that situation. Me and my wife, it was really hard.
Leo Bensages says compensation helped cover the loss and he's now restocked. The Prime Minister said today it's possible legislation may have hindered a faster response to the crisis. A major governmental review of the country's healthcare system could shake up the way services are delivered around the country. The Health Minister wants an examination of inequities in getting healthcare in different regions, saying complexities in the current system can get in the way. David Clark wants more services sharing and less bureaucracy in the health sector, but says that needs to be balanced with the needs of the public.
The review will be tasked with looking at the future health needs for New Zealand. We're looking ahead 30 years, not just 3 years, to see how we can best optimise our health services for New Zealanders across the board.
David Clark says the review will complete an interim report by next July. Nurses want security guards stationed at Christchurch Hillmorton Hospital's acute inpatient unit following another serious assault. Staff at the mental health unit say a nurse was strangled and dragged across the floor by a psychotic patient early on Sunday morning. The Canterbury DHB has previously been against placing security guards on the wards, but the nurses' organisation's John Miller says it now has no choice.
We've asked the DHB again to look at, as an interim measure, to look at having security on the wards. The DHB have given good reasons why they aren't keen, and in the long term are looking at potentially another type of support worker. But we were hoping and want them to look again at a short-term interim measure around getting some security on those wards.
John Miller. Business New Zealand is applauding steps towards sorting out a nationwide payroll mess, which has left thousands of workers out of pocket. The government has set up a task force with business and union representatives to look at ways to simplify the Holidays Act. Many employers have been underpaying their staff for years due to mistakes in calculating holiday pay. John Milford from Business New Zealand says it's no surprise businesses make errors given the unwieldy legislation.
They are impeded by this law that actually means they have to check 3 times, 3 calculations for every employee. And actually, the only way to really check is to do a manual calculation. That's how complicated this is.
John Milford says the business community is committed to getting it right. The veteran activist Hone Harawira says Waitangi will never be the same without the late Kingi Taurua. Mr Taurua was farewelled today at Whitiora Marae, north of Kerikeri, after 4 days of tangihanga. Hone Harawira says Kingi Taurua was seen as a radical kaumātua, but he was, above all, an old-school rangatira.
And when I talk about old school, they're the type who make a decision as to what the people are going to do, and then they announce. They don't ask for a committee meeting, they don't ask for a hui. They hear what the kōrero is and then they make the announcement. He'll be hugely missed in that regard. He had that ill. He had a connection to the old world and to the old people that we don't have anymore, not amongst those left at Waitangi.
Hone Harawira says Kingi Taurua was one of the first of his generation to adopt the full-face moko and wear it with style and grace. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport. The damning report into the Kiwis' failed World Cup campaign will provide a checklist to restore the mana of the Kiwi side, according to the newly appointed Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby League, Greg Peters. Peters says the independent report underlines the need to improve their performance across the organisation.
We have to make sure we've got the right people in the right jobs to do that, the right roles. And that's part of not only the high performance plan, but developing a strategic plan that we want to go out and consult widely with the zones and districts to ensure that we've got their input and everyone's got a sense of common purpose. We're not going to win every test match, but we should be aiming to win the vast majority of them.
Greg Peters. The All Blacks midfielder Anton Lienert-Brown has welcomed the appointment of South Africa's first black test captain. The Springbok flanker Sia Kolisi will lead South Africa in the 3-match series against England next month. The 26-year-old, who's played 28 international tests and captains the Western Stormers in Super Rugby, replaces the injured Warren Whiteley as captain. Rugby in South Africa has struggled to shake off the belief it's a white sport, and Lienert-Brown believes the appointment of Kolisi is a good move.
Personally, I know Sia Kolisi and he's a great man, but I think it's great for the country and awesome for him, and he's a great leader.
Meanwhile, the Australian-born Crusaders flanker Peter Samu will join the Brumbies for next year's Super Rugby season and is tipped to be named in the Wallabies squad tomorrow. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Bollinger samples new albums from Julia Deans and Courtney Barnett. We have a window on the world of virtual motherhood, and our after-dinner speaker is the left-of-centre thinker Brian Roper, who's been pondering the new government's response to climate change so far.
And between 10 and 11 p.m, join me, Karen Hay, for Lately. We'll be focusing on the events of the day, both nationally and internationally, and talking to the newsmakers in an eclectic mix that covers everything from the arts to politics to live events. That's Lately with Karen Hay in the 10 p.m. hour, weeknights on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, fine, apart from 1 or 2 showers about the west coast. Auckland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo, fine with morning frosts. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, occasional showers, some heavy today, mainly about the coast and north of Wairoa. Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, mainly fine in northern Taranaki, Manawatu and Horowhenua. Cloudy periods elsewhere with isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. Wellington and Wairarapa, occasional showers becoming confined to the coast tomorrow. Nelson, Buller, Westland, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine with morning frosts. However, a few showers about Christchurch and Banks Peninsula today. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine with morning and evening fog or frost, but cloudy at times about coastal areas. And the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for being with us. Police pursuits are again under the spotlight following the deaths of a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old near Palmerston North. Yesterday, the 12-year-old was Meadow James. Her cousin, Javanaya, spoke to Checkpoint on behalf of her family. Here's what she wanted to say.
She died at the scene of the car crash. She was only 12 years old. She had a big life towards her. Now she's gone, and everything's just upside down for my family and myself. And I just want everyone to understand that doing this stuff hurts us and our family, and it means a lot for the support people are putting into us and my family, my cousin, her sister, and everything. I just want Meadow to know that I love her with every bit of my heart.
That's Meadow's cousin, Jaffa Naya. Well, Palmerston North is in shock after the pursuit, which also left a 15-year-old girl in hospital. A 15-year-old and a 12-year-old dead, a 15-year-old in hospital. Reporter Charlie Drever is in the city and she filed this report.
Skid marks and pieces of concrete from a power pole are the only grim reminders that remain after a car involving 3 young people swerved off Pioneer Highway and into a ditch. The police tried to stop the stolen blue Subaru, driven by the 15-year-old with 2 young female passengers inside. The car crashed opposite O'Leary Engineering. Its owner, Dean Sandbrook, was on the phone when he first heard the commotion outside.
2 of my staff members ran down the drive and came straight across the road to assist. As I came out of the office, I seen the power wires hanging down and sparking on our fence. So I yelled out to them to be, to actually stop, but they were on a mission.
Dean Sandbrook says he and other staff members then stopped traffic until emergency services were able to take over. He says the mess of the crash showed how fast they were travelling.
When the impact first happened, because it all happened very quickly, when I turned and I just seen a flash of blue, and when the car actually hit the power pole shot up in the air. Yes, it actually went quite high, and this is the remainder of the power pole here. And there was other bits of concrete have been found, scattered further down the drain here.
Dion Labouchan was one of the workers who ran to the wreckage and spoke to the injured girl trapped in the back.
Yeah, she was a bit dazed at first. We asked how many people were in the vehicle. She said there were 3 of us, but at that time I could only see the 2 people, which was her and the driver. After we tried to get her out, then I noticed the 3rd victim lying underneath the driver's seat.
But Dean Labouchan says he supports the police's decision to pursue because if they didn't, crime would get out of hand. The Palmerston North Mayor, Grant Smith, also supported the police.
Our police are fantastic here in the wider Central Districts region, and especially Palmerston North. We have very, very low crime rates. The inner city here is probably one of the safest inner cities in New Zealand. We've done a lot of work. They'll take this hard because we think we are doing a reasonable job. So, yeah, we'll debrief and we'll just see if there are any gaps where we need to be plugging them.
But the Police Association Vice President Craig Ticklepenny says it's getting to a stage where lawmakers and police will need to look at pursuit policy.
The situation is, though, if there's just a blanket abandon chase type policy, as per our policy states, it just invites drivers, lawbreakers, drunk drivers to risk driving off and actually potentially threatening the life of members of the public and putting them at risk.
In a statement, the police say they always assess the risk of whether or not to pursue a driver who fails to stop for police. The latest deaths come 10 days after another 15-year-old died during a police chase while in the boot of a car in Wellington. For Checkpoint, Charlie Drever.
It's coming, it's 6:12. It's been more than 4 years, and today the search for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 officially ends. The plane with 239 people on board completely disappeared on a flight between Kuala Lumpur and Hong Kong in March 2014. Searches of the Southern Ocean have turned up nothing, and Malaysian authorities say there will be no more search extensions. CNN's Anna Corin on this extraordinary story.
A routine Malaysian Airlines flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing would rock the aviation industry and shatter the lives of the families of the 239 people on board. Flight MH370 vanished on the 8th of March 2014, less than an hour after takeoff. These were the last communications with air traffic control. Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah was flying the Boeing 777 when it vanished from radar. Mounting speculation, the disappearance of this ill-fated flight was in fact a deliberate act. A massive search immediately focused on the South China Sea, but a week later, tracking data released by Malaysian authorities revealed the plane had flown up to 8 hours in the opposite direction before crashing in the southern Indian Ocean off the coast of Western Australia. One of the most challenging and exhaustive searches in history began with the initial search zone roughly half the size of the United States.
We're not searching for a needle in a haystack, we're still trying to define where the haystack is.
The loss of MH370 is the most bizarre mystery ever in aviation, and arguably probably one of the most bizarre mysteries in any field at all.
In an Australian-led search, experts honed in on 60,000 square kilometres of seabed, 2,000 kilometres off the coast of Perth.
If there is a plane down there, we will see it.
Using sonar equipment and autonomous underwater vehicles, they navigated trenches, volcanoes and underwater mountains, searching for a debris field up to 6 kilometres below the surface.
We're looking for small features similar to something like this pixel.
But more than a year into the search, thousands of kilometres away, debris from MH370 began washing up on the coast of Africa and islands in the Indian Ocean. As the underwater search dragged on, the Australian, Malaysian and Chinese governments funding the $150 million operation decided it had gone on long enough, officially ending the search in January 2017, devastating families all over again. Earlier this year, a private US company took up the search on a no-find, no-fee basis. But after 5 months, it too has failed to produce any results and is ending its operation. If the Malaysian government decides to end this search and there's no further search, then I will be very angry, says Zhang Hui, who lost his mother. We cannot accept this kind of outcome. For KS Narendran, whose beloved wife was aboard MH370, he is also pleading for the Malaysians to keep searching.
Do not give up the search. Stay focused on finding what really happened, finding the plane and finding the truth.
And that was KS Narendran, who lost his wife on MH370, ending that report from CNN's Anna Corinne. Unbelievable. A plane just disappearing, and 4 and a bit years on, still not found. What we have found is an enormous amount of feedback on police chases, if you will excuse the worst segue in the history of broadcasting. You are texting 2101 in great numbers. It's pretty polarised, but a lot of support coming in the last 15 or 20 minutes for police. In every single case when someone has died during or after an attempt to evade the police, the driver of the car that crashed was the person at fault. And how often was that driver a police officer? The answer says it all, says Gordon. If the car had been left alone and crashed into an innocent driver, people would complain that the police didn't stop them. Seems they just can't win. And Anna says, if you flee police, you are guilty. Of course, I'm sorry you make that choice, but really it's not the police's fault that you chose to flee. Thank you, 2101, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. You can, by the way, contact us in confidence. If you email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz and want to talk to us about something and not give us the details in your email, we will email you back and arrange to deal with you in private. And we're getting an increasing number of people whistleblowing in that fashion. Thank you all. It's 6:17. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has travelled to South Canterbury to meet farmers dealing with Mycoplasma bovis, accompanied by Agriculture and Biosecurity Minister Damien O'Connor, who was live on Checkpoint last night, of course, talking about this issue, along with other industry leaders. The Prime Minister said an overhaul of the Biosecurity Act would happen once MPI's investigation was complete and the original source of the infection was confirmed. Zach Fleming and Nick Monroe, who've been doing a fantastic job, report from Waimate.
Yesterday, the government announced a 10-year plan to eradicate Mycoplasma bovis. And less than 24 hours on, the Prime Minister and Agricultural Minister were on a South Canterbury farm selling the future.
What we've talked about here today, with the experience of farmers who have been through this, is that with the process of first culling, the process of disinfecting and a 60-day stand down, then those farmers have that certainty to move on, to bring stock back onto their farm and continue farming. There is no doubt that that is a very difficult process, but hearing that for those farmers there is this light at the end of the tunnel at least tells us that that certainty matters, the way we compensate matters, and that they can then move on and get on with farming again.
9 months after his herd tested positive for Mycoplasma bovis, farmer Leo Benziguez welcomed Jacinda Ardern, Damien O'Connor and industry representatives to his Waimati farm. His herd of 950 cows and 200 calves were culled, but he has since repopulated. Unlike most other farmers, he's also received $1.8 million in compensation and expects to receive the remaining $200,000 he is owed within the next fortnight.
How was it to see all your stock taken away to slaughter?
Look, that is not something, it's not something I really want to talk about it. It's all done, everything being killed, it's the past, it's done. We have to focus on the future.
Also focusing on the future, Biosecurity and Agricultural Minister Damien O'Connor announcing a boost to MPI numbers after criticism of MPI's handling of the disease. There will be 25 more incident control point managers who will work one-on-one with affected farmers. There will also be a boost to the compensation team to help process claims faster, and a new field office will open in Cambridge. And the Prime Minister pledging support today for the mental health of farmers dealing with uncertainty about their financial future and the future of their herds.
We've had the Rural Support Trust here with us and Rural Women to have that very conversation. Yes, this is an animal welfare issue, but this is an issue of human welfare as well. They're doing an extraordinary job on the ground. We want to support them as much as we can while farmers who are affected go through this. But actually that's one of the things that hearing the experience today of what it's meant to go through this really helps us to make sure that we mitigate as much as we can the personal effects of this kind of experience.
There'll be months of uncertainty for some farmers, though, right, on the restricted properties where they don't know if their cattle are going to be culled or not, they're going to sleep every night.
That should get better. That should get better now that we have the certainty of this plan.
Look, we're putting more resource into this whole area. We appreciate with our winter, it's hard on grazing, getting the right feed to the right animals. It's hard on families, of course, an increasing number who have been given notice of direction. There's an initial effort. Visits like this today give us indicators of what we need to do better, and we'll be acting on every one of those.
The government's phased eradication at a cost of $886 million will see the cull of over 150,000 cattle throughout New Zealand. Leo Benziguez says there's light at the end of the tunnel, though.
Every farm infected from now on should go through, work with MPI, work together, brother against, because it doesn't work. There have to be positive, and yes, it's hard, but in the end, you just have to start again.
Damien O'Connor says the Biosecurity Act will need to be overhauled once the cause of the outbreak is identified. In Waimate for Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Oh boy, feedback 2101. Thank you. Tragic deaths. Where are the parents in terms of responsibility to raise their children to prevent this type of action? Asked one texter. You can't assume people in a chase are rational, especially younger drivers. The outcome of dying in a crash vastly outweighs their alleged crimes, says another. And this text, just in from Kim in Opotiki, says children 15 years and under, no prefrontal cortex development, not capable yet of sound logical decision making, but the police do have that capacity. Sadly, by choosing to chase children out of control in cars, the police are not using their prefrontal cortex. They are the adults here. Children need our protection no matter who they are or how silly they are being. Thank you all for your feedback. Italy's President Sergio Mattarella has set the country on a path to fresh elections, appointing a former International Monetary Fund official as interim Prime Minister. Carlo Cottarelli will be tasked with planning for snap elections and passing the next budget in a move that's been met with relief in parliaments across the EU. The BBC's James Reynolds reports.
Carlo Cottarelli is a pro-Euro economist and a non-populist. The President has picked him to maintain Italy's current relationship with the European Union.
It's essential to defend our interests in Europe and be constructive. Italy is a founding country. Our role is essential, as is our continued participation in the euro.
But the populists, led here by the League's Matteo Salvini, have the numbers to reject the President's choice and force early elections. Mr. Salvini, who's been going up in the polls, wants the freedom to govern his way.
If the President of the Republic tells us, do as you want, but don't touch the European rules, we have a problem with democracy. Because I think in Italy, the people are sovereign and don't depend entirely on European markets and bureaucracies.
Wherever you look here, there are signs of Italy's 6-decade-long partnership with Europe. But this country has begun to shift. This is the country that helped to found the European Union. Why are the populist parties turning against it?
Because people think that Germany rules all Europe and Germany rules Italy, and they want to control Italy, and the agreements on European Union is an advantage for Germany and a disadvantage for Italy.
Italy is used to changing prime ministers, but this is much more serious than that. An election later this year may become an unofficial referendum on Italy's membership of the euro and on its place in the European Union that this country helped to create.
James Reynolds in Rome, 6:25 across the Tasman now. And the New Zealand-born former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce has agreed to tell all in a TV interview alongside his new partner, Vicky Campion, for a fat fee. Of course, this is Australian commercial TV, a cool $150,000 for appearing. Senior government ministers are criticising and questioning his judgment, with one saying she thinks most Australians would be disgusted with his decision. The ABC's Stephanie Boris reports.
Barnaby Joyce says he had no choice.
Look, we tried for privacy.
And because that didn't work, the former Deputy Prime Minister says he's resorting to selling his personal story to the media.
And the last fortnight we've had drones over our house, we've had paparazzi waiting for us outside Armidale Airport, we've had people following us to Uralla. We tried just burning this out and that didn't work.
The ABC has confirmed Mr Joyce and his new partner Vicky Campion have agreed to do an exclusive interview with the Channel 7 network, and it's believed the station will hand over $150,000 that's set to be put into a trust fund for their baby son. Michael McCormack took on the role of Nationals leader and Deputy Prime Minister when Barnaby Joyce was forced to step aside.
I wouldn't do it. That's a personal matter for Barnaby. Whilst you're a serving member of Parliament, you have to wonder about the merit of these things.
He says he will talk to Mr Joyce about whether it was appropriate for him to sell his story.
I'll have a chat to Barnaby like I always have a chat with him. That conversation will no doubt come up, but the fact is I'm getting on selling the budget.
As to whether Minister McCormack will watch the report...
Depends on what I'm doing on Sunday night. At the moment, I've got a function booked in, so probably won't.
Whilst some of his colleagues have questioned Mr Joyce's decision, not everyone is critical, with one senator urging people to back off his colleague and friend.
Well, I think he should be left in a bit of peace. He told me about the drones over the house and people, some in the media, harassing him.
National Senator John Williams met baby Sebastian a week ago and says he feels sorry for the family.
It's not for me to advise anyone on what decisions they make in their political life or their personal life.
Would you take $150,000 to tell your private life story?
What a hypothetical story. What media would pay me to tell my story? Hey, come on, get the chequebook out while we're here. What, do you want me to keep going?
But it's no laughing matter. Government Minister and National MP Darren Chester is canvassing the idea of Parliament discussing whether paid interviews should be banned.
My view is chequebook journalism isn't great for journalism, and I don't think that sitting MPs want to be in a position where the public is questioning have they been paid to appear on a program.
He says the issue must be addressed.
This is unprecedented in my 10 years as a Member of Parliament, so I think a conversation among my colleagues and across party lines about whether this is appropriate.
Nationals leader Michael McCormack says he's open to the idea being tossed around in the party room. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says he will also talk to Mr Joyce about his decision.
Stephanie Boris, the ABC in Canberra. France has offered citizenship to an illegal immigrant who climbed up the outside of an apartment block to save a boy who was about to fall from a balcony. I suspect many of you have seen the footage. Reuters' Chris Dagenham reports.
France on Monday offered citizenship to an illegal immigrant from Mali who scaled the front of a Paris apartment building to save a boy who was about to fall from a fourth-floor balcony. French President Emmanuel Macron met with Mamadou Gassama, who has been nicknamed Spider-Man because of his heroic feat. Macron congratulated Gassama and said France would give him a job in the Paris Emergency Services. Ministers said the citizenship process would be sped up for Gassama, although he can't legally be granted citizenship right away. Illegal immigration from Africa and the Middle East has become a major issue in France and much of Europe. Macron has been criticized by left-wing voters for taking a tougher stance on immigration since his election. But Macron's visit with Gassama on Monday may have been an effort to send a message to voters by signaling a more welcoming attitude to a deserving migrant.
40 seconds to go on Checkpoint. We've had so much feedback on police pursuits. We're going to revisit that tomorrow night. Thank you for listening to us and for engaging with us in such great numbers, with such passion, insight, and singular points of view in some cases. We appreciate it. That is Checkpoint for this evening. Thank you for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. On behalf of our excellent and hard-working team, we hope to see you same place, same time tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Minister of Housing says the needless panic about methamphetamine has wasted millions of dollars and caused hundreds of needless evictions. Nurses want security guards at Christchurch Hillmorton Hospital's acute inpatient unit after a nurse was strangled and dragged across the floor by a psychotic patient. The government thinks current biosecurity legislation may have hindered a faster response to the Mycoplasma bovis crisis, and a comprehensive review of the Biosecurity Act is planned. The Health Minister's drawing attention to inequities in the health system and has ordered a review that should shake up the sector. Rising oral health problems in children has led to the Dentist Association to call for graphic images of rotted teeth on sugar drinks. And Tower Insurance says consumers are facing higher premiums to cover the cost of stormy weather that's hit the country so far this year. Our next news and